Brooklyn City Council Public Safety and Environmental Committee meeting to order. Mary Jo, can you please call the roll?
Brian Van Kirk.
Here.
Mary Belvier. Here. Jackie Here.
All right, very good. On May 28th of 20...
I'm sorry, Barb Politsky. I'm looking right at you. Barb Politsky. Here. Thank you.
All right, on May 28, 2019, Cuyahoga County Council adopted Council Ordinance 02009005, enacting Chapter 1304 of the Cuyahoga County Code to implement a disposable bag ban. The ordinance we are discussing in this committee this evening, Brooklyn Ordinance 2019-38, would create conflicting legislation for the City of Brooklyn exempting retailers from the county ban, and Brooklyn is able to do this under the home rule provision provided for at both the state and county level. We are holding this meeting to primarily hear the thoughts from Brooklyn residents regarding this ban and the other counter legislation. We have also invited a couple of invited guests here this evening that I will introduce for them shortly. I was going to take the time to read through the legislation. I'm not going to do that. I will just read the first sections of both of them. All right. The first one coming from the Cuyahoga County Council of Cuyahoga County, Ohio Ordinance number 02019005. Whereas the precipitous increase in plastic production and plastic consumption over the past 70 years has resulted in approximately 269,000 tons of globally distributed plastic waste pollution, particularly in oceans, lakes, and other marine waterways. And whereas plastic waste is not biodegradable and recycled plastic suffers from polymer degradation, limiting its useful life as a recyclable material, inevitably resulting in non-biodegradable microplastic particle pollution. And whereas discarded disposable bags are a major source of litter, pollute our open spaces, harm and kill wildlife, clog storm drains resulting in localized flooding, end up as debris in our neighborhoods and waterways and contribute to blight. And whereas the pollution from disposable bags impose external cleanup, removal and processing costs on our communities. And whereas Cuyahoga County Council has a compelling public interest in discouraging the wasteful use of disposable bags and mitigating the negative impact disposable bags have on our environment. And whereas China has implemented its, quote, national sword, end quote, policy, in which no longer accepts 24 types of recycled plastic, including disposable plastic bags, which has substantially diminished the economic viability of and market for the recycling of disposable plastic bags across the globe. And whereas Cuyahoga County Council desires to combat polluting effects of an accompanying blight caused by disposable bags on the environment of Cuyahoga County, then the ordinance introduces the code. It defines different terms in the code. Under section 1304.01, disposable plastic bag, quote, that's the quote, disposable plastic bag, means a bag made from either non-compostable plastic or compostable plastic provided by a retail establishment to a customer at point of sale for the purpose of transporting purchased items. Disposable plastic ban does not include, and these are the listed exemptions, a bag the customer brought with them to the retail establishment, a newspaper bag, a bag provided by a pharmacist that contains a prescription drug, a bag used to package a bulk item or to contain or wrap or perishable items such as meat, fish, produce, baked goods, or flowers. A bag that a restaurant gives the customer to take prepared or leftover food or drink from the restaurant. A bag intended for use as dry cleaning, garbage, or a yard waste bag. Pre-packaged bag used for the collection of pet waste. Non-permitted paper bags and permitted paper bags as defined in this chapter. Bags provided to the consumer for the purpose of transporting a partially consumed bottle of wine, pursuant to section 4301.62E of the Ohio Revised Code. A bag provided curbside pickup or for delivery, or lastly, a bag provided for the purpose of transporting hazardous materials. Then B, non-permitted paper bag means a paper bag provided by a retail establishment to a customer at a point of sale for the purpose of transporting goods which does not meet the standard of permitted paper bag. It goes on to say permitted paper bag must be at least 40% recyclable content and the bag must be 100% recyclable. Right, it goes on to describe some other things, but it describes the penalty in there. The penalty, if the retail establishment finds violation, shall be subject to a written warning for the first violation, a civil fine of up to $100 for the second, and a civil fine up to $500 for each subsequent violation, and a separate violation shall be deemed committed each day during or on which violation or noncompliance occurs. Right, so that impartiality is the county's ordinance, and of course, as was already spoken about in the committee in the council meeting, 2019-38 provides a counter ordinance to that would essentially exempt all Brooklyn retailers from the county ban. It also enacts a new chapter of our ordinances, chapter 759, which requires that any supermarket, convenience store, department store, shop, service station, or restaurant and any other sales outlet occupying 30,000 square feet or more of usable space where a customer can buy goods or food. Disposable plastic bag means a ban made from either non-combustible plastic. It's the same description as given in the county ordinance. And so, and then if there's a penalty here, whoever violates any provision of the chapter shall be guilty of a minor misdemeanor. Each day's continued violation shall constitute a separate offense. And of course, as was amended in our council meeting, that will go into effect on January the 1st of 2020. Right, so those are the two ordinances that we're talking about this evening, and I just wanted to get those on the record. I was going to read through some comments. I'm not going to do that now for sake of time, as I already read through many of them in our council meeting. I will say this before we get started. Currently, residents, if they don't want to use the plastic bags, they certainly are currently welcome to not use them. They are already welcome to bring their own. Many of them do, including myself, right? Many times, right? So many of them are willing to you are going to do that if you'd like to, right? So currently, there are already several businesses in Brooklyn that already adhere to this new chapter that hasn't been adopted yet. Giant Eagle being one of them. I have spoken with Giant Eagle among others, and there may be others as well that I'm not aware of, but I know that there's several in our city that already subscribe to this. As far as being recyclable or not, they are recyclable. There are companies that do take them. Of course, the national sword policy implemented by China has taken a hit to the recycling. It is my belief that it is temporary. That, as I mentioned in the council meeting, that the free market will take over, as it has done countless other times in other areas, and will make it profitable once again for recycling to continue. So at this time, I'm going to open the floor for public comments. All right, public comments will follow the same rules as our normal council meeting unless the other committee members object. So if anyone in the audience has anything to say for the good and welfare of the city of Brooklyn in regards to 2019-38, please step forward, state your name and address, including your city. You'll be recognized. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes or fewer. Our two invited guests tonight, Mr. Foley and Mr. Appersada, I'll introduce you guys separately at a later time. So this is now open for the public.
I'm going to pass this out so you can follow with me as I speak to you. Thank you.
So this is being recorded. I'm going to ask you to stay here just so we can get this, if that's okay. For your comments, yes, please. Yes, just so we can get this out. Thank you.
Before I turn to the statement I have just passed out, I wanted to make an observation of
Excuse me, before you start, if you could please say your name.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Constance Fredrickson. I am chair of the Coalition to Curb Plastic. I live in Berea, but since I have done substantial study, attended all the Cuyahoga County Council and subcommittee meetings addressing this issue, I feel fairly well informed about the issue. I am puzzled by the suggestion that home rule should be pulled as an objection to this subject, since the person who wants to use home rule argues that the county never approaches you on issues. This is no different than any of the other issues. Therefore, I see no reason to now object to this specific bill because of home rule rather than the content itself. And if you will then follow with me, I have observed that this ordinance, when I looked through it, is business neutral, anti-environmental, and anti-taxpayer. The business ordinance seeks to address an anticipated problem that does not exist, i.e., customers will go elsewhere. It's not stated, but I'm hearing you're concerned about business reaction. The county bill provides a level playing field. 385 municipalities have already instituted bans, and the research demonstrates no sales impact on businesses. Anti-environmental, each bag will be present in our world for at least 100 years, some say many hundreds of years. It will be in our soil, our water, our food, and in our human bodies as a result. Recycling is a myth. The highest amount that was ever recorded was 9.5 before China stopped accepting. Recycling itself is toxic because chemical burning and chemical waste is dumped. It is anti-taxpayer because we pay. County Solid Waste Department reports the high cost to taxpayers of dealing with plastic waste in landfills, sewer clogs, lake and stream cleanup. Brooklyn City will have to use taxpayers' funds to defend the action in court. The county cannot allow a precedent to be set where a municipality refuses legitimate county processes of conducting its orderly mandate. Home rule is an open issue in the courts. It is not a settled issue, so it will have to go to court. Do you have questions?
I do not. Other councilor? Thank you. Anyone out from the public have anything to say? Okay, thank you, Constance, for your patience this evening and for coming in. I appreciate that. The committee has invited two gentlemen to be with us tonight to shed further light on this legislation, so I'm going to introduce them separately. At this time, I will invite Mike Foley to come speak. Mike is the first director of the Department of Sustainability for Cuyahoga County. He was appointed to lead the office in February of 2015 by Executive Armin Budish, after having served in the Ohio General Assembly from 06 to 14, and he represented the 14th district at this time. Prior to that, he worked as the executive director for the Cleveland Tenants Organization for almost 10 years, and before that, he was the court administrator for Cleveland Municipal Housing Court. And so Mike was very instrumental in drafting this legislation, I'm come to understand. So at this time, Mr. Foley, I'll turn it over to you. If you need to move, if you could use the handheld mic there, that would be beneficial.
Thanks.
Is that recorded? Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. You're right, Mike Foley, the Director of Sustainability. My running joke is that in the history of Cuyahoga County, I am the greatest sustainability director the county has ever seen. Other people always say, remind me, well, you're also the worst, right? Just one, I did not write the ordinance. We did. This is a council-driven ordinance, and so Councilwoman Simon and Councilwoman Miller were really the driving force. As you said, noted, it passed in May of 2019, and it passed with a 9-2 vote. So, I was going to run through just to make sure we're all on the same page. Can you hear me okay? This is okay. Just so we're all on the same page, we wanted to walk through. As we said, it was a 9-2 vote passed by County Council. Executive Budish signed it, thought it supported it, the legislation, thought it was good legislation. So I just wanted to walk through some of the reasonings why the county thought this was important and why we should be taking this action. And then I did want to respond to a couple of the comments you made earlier, Council President Kirk, about the home rule and the communications. So, okay, so one of the reasons we're thinking about this is we are in an interesting place in the world geographically. We're on the Great Lakes. We are Lake Erie is our back door. It's something that we need to think about in terms of our natural resources and protecting our natural resources as much as possible. And we were this is the 50th anniversary of the river burning. We've been called a mistake on the lake. We're getting past that now. So one of the things I think we want to think about is how do we take advantage of kind of this change in perception about Cuyahoga County and see it's more as a pristine place, a change that has changed and become more progressive in terms of environmental matters. So that's one of the reasons that the legislation was passed. Lake Erie, rivers, parks,
I'm sorry, is it possible for, that mic is giving us fits.
Yeah.
I'll forward, I can forward here.
Yeah, Mr. Butler, forward your slides. If you could just stand over here at this.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Sorry about that. Thank you. That thing's giving us more problems.
I don't know why.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
That's okay.
You can even look that up.
No. I got a copy of this stuff. Okay. So look, we need to think about the lake. We need to think about the river and the parks and kind of the perceptions and what it means to our community and our region going forward. Our access to clean drinking water is the envy of communities around the world. It's one of our natural advantages is having access to clean drinking water. 21% of all the fresh water in the world is in the Great Lakes. Great Lakes are in our backyard. So there's places like California and the far west that would kill for being close to the Great Lakes. The southeast is dying because they're getting way too much water. We're in this kind of interesting place in the geography of the world that we need to think about and protect and cherish. So our growth is at risk from discarded plastics going into the lake, pollution of the lakes. We want to make sure we're as pristine as possible and protecting the health of the Great Lakes as possible. So County Council staff actually has done some research on this. Over 300 million bags are discarded. 300 million bags a year discarded in Cuyahoga County alone. Drinking water treatment plants have problems filtering out bags. So there's stuff that gets out in the lake, it comes back in the water intake systems, and it causes both ecological but also financial problems for systems to take that stuff out. And then same with sewer and water, the sewer systems that we have. So we've already have a Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District that we've got a lot of issues we have to deal with in terms of minimizing the discharges going out into the lake in the future. We've got a whole bunch of rate increases that are affecting us. Having a lot of the plastic bags in the system doesn't help and contributes to the problems that our sewer system faces in the county. Next slide. A lot of headlines, and I can't read them because my slides are too, I can't see them from behind there. But a lot of headlines recently just in terms of the cost associated with plastic bags and their impacts on the health of the Great Lakes. Next slide. So again, they clog our sewers and cause costly backups and floods. They litter our neighborhoods. Councilwoman Ryan Shockey, you were out cleaning up neighborhoods over the last week. I imagine, every third piece of trash you're picking up is a plastic bag probably. I mean, it's one of the problems we have in this community. I drove in here I live in West Park. I drove on Bel Air Avenue, and just plastic bags are all over the place. They're just unsightly. They're littering the place all over the place. A lot of research recently about how plastic bags get into the water. They leach toxins into the lake, into the air. So there's environmental concerns, health concerns above just the basic environmental concerns. And look, they harm wildlife, fish, and farm animals. Sometimes this is not applicable to Cuyahoga County, but you've seen kind of the pictures of the plastic bags going around the turtles and some of the problems of plastics and wildlife. Okay, next, Kevin. So again, over 319 million bags of waste each year in Cuyahoga County. The bags don't go away. Many sit in landfills for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. They're tough to recycle and not biodegradable. Next slide, Kevin. And they're not necessary. On average, bags are only used for about 12 minutes. Yet take up to we've got thousands of years, but at least up to hundreds of years of sitting and not degrading and sitting in the landfills and the soil of the earth. They rip easily, at least the current bags do. and reusable bags, at least the ones that we're considering, are stronger, more convenient, can carry more items, heavier items. Next slide, Kevin. So bags are not necessary, not effective. They cost businesses, consumers, taxpayers, and the environment. They require millions of barrels of oil each year to produce. So these are not a renewable resource. They are costly in terms of the genesis of how they're created. Next slide. And then bag regulations work. China's banned bags for over a decade. Ireland has had a bag ban for over 17 years. Right now, there are at least 127 countries and at least 349 jurisdictions in the United States that have regulations, some sort of regulations on plastic bags. This is not something that is new or weird or that other folks aren't thinking about. In fact, it's maybe a little bit, I don't know, embarrassing is the right word, but for a city that's on the Great Lakes that cares about its water supply so deeply, to not be at the forefront of this is something that I think we needed to be working on this years ago, to be honest with you. Next slide. So bag regulations have worked. In Chicago alone, bag usage dropped by more than 50% in the first month of their program. In areas like San Jose, programs have reduced the amount of plastic litter in drain systems by 89% and 60% in creeks, rivers, streets, and neighborhoods. The bans seem to work and have effect. This isn't going to solve all our problems, by the way. This isn't the silver bullet to solving all of our pollution problems, but it has, in general, it has positive effect on reducing pollution. Yeah, the next slide, Kevin. Are you there? Okay, so the other side, as I mentioned, there are some studies that have come out just in terms of the health implications of plastic, in terms of now as precipitation occurs, plastic kind of particles are so small they're now being seen in rainfall, and so precipitation, as we get rain events, there's plastic coming into our environment. Next one. Okay. Same thing. More kind of recent studies. Nearly 22 million pounds of plastic enter the Great Lakes each year right now. Next slide, Kevin. Okay. So our county's bag ban, we think, is helpful and helps us all. Reduces costly flooding and future sewer costs from bag pollution. Protects Lake Erie and our local waterways from local bag pollution. Helps prevent plastic bag toxins from leaching into our drinking water. Next. Keeps our region on track for growth. This is something I think we want to brag about and talk about and use as a kind of a driver for why people want to come to Cuyahoga County. Reduces litter and blight in the neighborhoods. And I think what the actual language has been talked about, I've got a copy of the actual language, but I think you've gone over it a number of times. This is something that affects retail stores, grocery stores. It's not everything. So one of the things that the council president said is we're picking winners and losers. We're not picking winners and losers. We're picking categories, I think. So we're picking retail stores and we're picking grocery stores. And some items have not been, take out bags after you go and eat a meal, or dry cleaning bags are not part of this. But the vast majority of plastic bags we think are being caught here, which is what we're trying to accomplish. We're not getting everything, but we're getting the majority, I think. Next slide, Kevin. I don't know where you're at now. Okay, so next slide. So what we're trying to do at the county, I think, is educate consumers as much as possible. I think one of the concerns or complaints was raised is that the county did not come out and talk to communities. I'm not going to, address whether we did or not. The legislation has been around in one form or another for over 5 years in county council. I think Councilwoman Simon brought this first up in 5 or 6 years ago, before I even came on board of the Department of Sustainability. So she's been working on this for many years and has had numerous meetings throughout the county. But we are where we are right now, and We know that our ban, assuming it doesn't get preempted at the federal or the state level, will take place in January, and we're going to go out. We've hired a consulting firm to help us do education, so we're going to educate consumers, we're going to educate stores as much as possible over the next 4 months, just on what's affected as a store, as a consumer, getting ready to understand why we're doing this for the most part, why this is important. So we're working on that. The Solid Waste District is putting money into actually buying recyclable bags that can be used to distribute to residents who need them. We're not going to give them to everybody because we don't have $800,000 to do this, but there is some money that the Solid Waste District has, and we're going to and they are going to be distributing bags over the next before the end of the year to folks who have a need for reusable bags. We're trying to partner with community groups and leaders as much as possible and encourage reusable bag programs to help everyone. So in general, last slide here, we think this helps strengthen our region, strengthen the how people see our region. It helps improve our quality and our health and our quality of life. Protects Lake Erie and our local rivers and waterways, and does our part. This issue about plastic is we in Cuyahoga County aren't going to solve all the problems of the world, right? But we're doing our part, and sometimes we have to do our part, right? So that's what we think this does. But it helps our local health, no doubt about it. But it also puts us in a position to do what we think is contributing to the betterment of the world. And in terms of just the home rule issue, I just want to go back to that. So look, we recognize that any city can, and we're not attacking home rule here. I just want to be very clear about that. We recognize that any community in the county can opt out of this legislation. And that's the way the county charter is written, that communities have the right to opt out and utilize their home rule as well. Just because you can, though, doesn't mean it's a good idea, right? And so this is an issue that we'd rather not have, I think, kind of patchwork regulations in different communities. We'd love this to be county-wide without any cities opting out, because we think it's a good thing to do, right? And it has positive health and environmental benefits for the county. So we understand that you can opt out if you want to, that you do have home rule authority, but we rather you didn't, because we think it contradicts kind of the good things we're trying to do with this ordinance. So if that'll take any questions, I guess. Or
any questions from anyone on the committee? This is up here.
Well, I just want to say thank you for coming. I'm glad I got to meet you. I want to say I'm in the restaurant business, and I would have to say you really encouraged me to want to use the little orders to go, to put when people will have extra food at the restaurant, to use those, like, I want to say little boxes that fold over, many times, instead of using plastic bags, to put them in plastic bags and they can carry them this way, that some of the finer restaurants do. I'd like to start using that. And I would like to say, I do love Cleveland with my whole heart and soul, and I do love the Great Lakes. I spend a lot of time on Lake Erie, and my heart breaks. Actually today, when I was leaving my restaurant after work today, I saw a bag on my patio, and I was mad that the wind kind of kicked up this afternoon, and it was a plastic bag. And I picked it up, and I kind of was so discouraged, and I said, I know we're going to talk about these plastic bags. And I found one on my patio, and I threw it out. And I just thought, yes, these bags, it's got to start somewhere. And if we don't start thinking about our environment, and it happens that we as Americans and just people in general, we don't like to be inconvenienced. It's easier to put it in a bag, just grab that bag. But yes, it's a little bit inconvenience to grab one of those recyclable bags and reuse it. I will be the first one to say, I keep forgetting my recyclable bags, and I have a whole slew of them that I forget to take to the store, and I keep rebuying and rebuying. But yes, it does have to start someplace. And I don't mean to be critical to you, Meg, but I'm surprised you put your name on this ordinance, that you walked the city all summer long.
This is supposed to be questions directed to you.
Yeah, okay, I'm just mentioning that, I'm sorry, but and I'm sure you picked up all kinds of bags. But those bags are all over the city. I have a business in Tremont, and I see them all the time, and it does break my heart. Lincoln Park has them all the time. So we do have to start someplace, and I thank you for coming and educating us with that. You know, those bags, and especially like the Marks bags, they're not good for anything. You put a couple little things in the Marks bag, by the time you get them out of the car, I mean, everybody loves Marks, they break and everything comes out of them already. You put a couple little things and it's all crunched. You know what I mean? Why even bother with it? So, I do thank you for coming, and I do hope that, and I think majority of the people would think about that and probably not go for this. I think it's wrong, especially with our Great Lakes. We have the most beautiful Great Lakes. I mean, our Lake Erie. Why do we want to clog it up? Why do we want to mess it up? That's my opinion.
Councilwoman, thank you. I didn't add this, but one of the things that the Port Authority does is they run up and they've got a couple boats that just go clean up the river every year. And, you know, the majority of the stuff they're picking up are plastic bags and cigarette butts.
I was just going to ask him, my question, I guess, would be, when they no longer are able to use plastic bags, what's going to happen to, how do you get rid of dog waste? How do you get rid of other trash? You're going to have some sort of plastic. You cannot get rid of all plastic. It's an impossibility. So can you address that in any way?
Yeah, so dog waste bags are exempted from, you can buy those in bulk, so people can, look, I hate to say it's going to be an expense rather than right now you're getting free bags, right? So you won't have those free bags to pick up your dog waste. So those are exempted from, but those can be sold at retail stores and they're exempted from the legislation, basically, from grocery stores, basically, so you can buy those. And then the other question was?
Again, you know, taking like trash goes to the dump, so you're never going to get rid of plastic totally.
No, and this is not, so this isn't going to solve all the problems, and be very clear about this. It makes things better, it can hopefully makes them significantly better, but it's not going to solve all the problems. And to some degree, right, there will be, for things like dog waste bags, you know, you may have to pay a couple of bucks for them at the grocery store. Because
for years I've been organic and I've used my cloth bags for years. I mean, it doesn't affect me in that many ways, but may affect people that can least afford it, and that's part of my concern.
I understand.
Any other questions? Just a couple things, Mr. Floyd. First of all, thank you for being so late tonight. I appreciate that. And just as a housekeeping item, the vote was actually 8-3 on that.
Was it? Okay. All right. All right. Sorry.
I just looked at the double check and I thought I had that right. But
okay,
you know, I understand that it's a good thing that, you know, people say it's a good thing to do this, attempting to make things better. And I certainly don't think that Mrs. Belbier was saying that if we are opposed to this, that we're suggesting that we don't like the Great Lakes and that we just are okay with dumping plastics in there, because that absolutely, nothing could be further from the truth. Right? So I don't think anyone's saying that, but just want to go on record saying that. Saying that it's a good thing to do, it's a nice line, but that's a matter of opinion. You know, because I particularly don't think that it's a good thing to do, and that's a matter of opinion, and we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. As far as the home rule goes, I thank you for clarifying that, because, you know, what you said. I mean, we do have this option, that's why home rule exists. In regards to previous legislation, this is not by any means the first time that I have complained about the county not contacting the city in regards to these things. This has happened before, and it's unfortunate, but it does happen. As far in regards to when this legislation was introduced, I don't know, but we were never contacted by the city. I know it's not your fault, all right, but I'm just, you know, you're here representing the county, so, you know, that's where I stand with that. We'll talk about some other things here in a second, but anyone else have any questions for any other members on council? Any questions for Mr. Foley before he has a seat? Right, thank you, Mr. Foley.
And I do want to, look, I think probably sometimes we do the best job we can sometimes to communicate with folks, and sometimes we're good at it, sometimes we're not. This is a piece of legislation that came through council, and there was a lot of kind of back and forth, and as kind of the art of the deal happens, or the you know, kind of sausage gets made, there's a timeliness that it occurred, and votes kind of welled up for it, so it was passed in that manner. So I'm not going to suggest that the county doesn't try to communicate as much as possible, because I think we do. Sometimes things happen and communication doesn't happen.
This issue and another issue, I think, there was no communication. One more question. You mentioned that there's a set of money set aside for education. This ordinance passed at the end of May. Has that education started? Because I've not seen anything.
Not yet, no. So the ban goes into effect in January. We've hired two consulting firms who are doing message testing right now. The campaign should be starting in mid-October to inform residents and commercial establishments kind of on what the ban says, what to expect, why it's important, why we think it's important. Part of this is hearts and minds, right? We want to make people understand that this is, why we're doing this, not that we're just doing something to people, but why it's important. So that should be starting in mid-October, late October.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gold. I appreciate it. All right, so at this time, I'm going to invite Jeff Epistorf to come speak. Mr. Epistorf reached out to me a few weeks ago, and we actually had a small conversation over email, and then we actually met and talked. And Mr. Epistorf is an expert in this field. He has worked in the plastic industry since 1984. He is currently the president of a company called Multiplast Systems that's located in Solon, Ohio. And I've asked him here tonight, because none of us are experts in plastic, and so I've asked him to come here tonight. He's got 35 years experience in this field. And so Mr. Epistorf, at this time, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you again for being so patient and coming tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Kirk. Basically, we just want to look at an overview of things. Primarily, my business is Multiplast Systems, started in 1999, and we're more in the plastic industry, but we try to be environmentally friendly. We do a lot involved with environmental solutions, whether it's recycled product, whether it's degradable product, whether it's pulp enhancement, whether it's microbial control, whatever the case may be. Those are the things that we try to help with. As far as I'm concerned, we don't sell this type of bag into any of these places in Cuyahoga County. So as far as a professional, it's not going to affect my business one way or the other. As far as personal, I live in Cuyahoga County and I work in Cuyahoga County, so from personally wise, I'd definitely be affected by it. Basically, overall, I think the perception that no bag is going to be able to be degradable or biodegradable is incorrect. Bags you can have a plant-based bag, or you can have a bag that has an additive to it, both of which will degrade in or compostable or in landfills. So you can take that 100, hundreds, or whatever, how many years that you want to say, for an untreated bag, which will be there for over a period of time, and then put into this type of additive and into a landfill, and it'll be 3, 5, 7, 10 years, whatever the case may be. So there is alternatives, there's options, and I think there's always alternatives and options. The second thing is as far as recycled product. In the ordinance, it seems like it's not really a good option. It's kind of like poo-pooed, so to speak. And environmental options or recycling is huge. I mean, it's huge. You can go ahead and you can look at Europe, which doesn't have very many landfills in it, and they have to find ways of getting rid of the plastic products, and basically they're recycling pretty much everything they possibly can. So it's a very big thing. It's a huge thing in industries. You can go right down 480 to Nestle's. They've already made the commitment in paper and writing to have 25% of their product to be from recycled product to be recycled by 2021. By 2025, it's supposed to be 50%. That's all based on recycling products. So it is a viable option out there for most industries and throughout the country and throughout the world. So that's a big factor. Some of the things that were kind of discussed here and talked about here is more in lines of no one likes to be told what to do. I think people like to have options. And no one likes to have someone put their hand in their pocket and take out money. And so with the ordinance here, it's basically you're going to be told you can't do this and it's going to cost money. How much money, I don't know, because basically the companies that are being affected are going to be the supermarkets. The supermarket has their front-end bags, which we're calling single-use bags, which is also a misnomer because there are no single-use bags. You can use these bags over and over and over and over again. Maybe not Mark's, because they do buy the cheapest bags around. But outside of that, and outside of that one location, outside of that one entity, 23 stores or so, all these other bags can be reused as a reusable bag as many times as you want. And they will last quite a long period of time. And then they can also be used for other alternatives and other things. So very few of the times are they bought, they could be, but bought and thrown away. But they have options to it. The supermarkets, the front end bags, the retail bags, are like 60 to 70% of their packaging costs. The t-shirt bag that we're talking, the retail bag, costs about 1.5 cents to them, 2 cents. And a paper bag, which is outlined here, which would be one of the options, is about 8 cents. So the question ends up being is who's going to pay for that difference? And they're using an awful lot of bags, and there's an awful lot of retailers that will fall under this ordinance. And the question will end up being is who's going to pay for that? And I doubt that the Giant Eagles and the Walmarts and whoever else is out there are going to take 100% of that hit because it's a monster hit. These companies don't switch from buying from one plastic bag to another plastic bag for a penny or two. So now you're going to ask them to go up about 6 cents or so. So that's a big factor. Landfills are starting to be less and less, and because we're filling them up with a lot of stuff. Less than 5% of a landfill is plastic bags, though. So, and so a lot of that is food. It's a lot of other options, a lot of other items, but and it's still 5% is still a big number. It's all a big number, but basically they're looking at biodegradable bags to be over $122 million in sales next year for various types of products. And when you use an additive, it allows those bags to again be degraded in a landfill. As far as what we try to really promote is education. So when you say that there's litter and everything, the state of New Jersey took a litter test, so to speak, that they did a survey for the whole state of New Jersey, 2018. And I don't know what it would be in Cuyahoga County, and I don't know what it would be in Ohio. But in New Jersey, paper bags, retail plastic bags, were 35th out of 39 items that are collected, which was less than 1% of the litter that was found that they picked up. Now again, it's aggravating, it's there, you see it, but it is not the number one source. It's not by far the number one source that was actually cleaned up by individuals. So that's something that's there. There's other people that call and complain and say, okay, if I'm being forced to do this, I'm going to find an alternative option. So what's the alternative option? Well, the alternative option in certain areas is unintended consequences, which is trash sales jumped after grocery bag bans. I have no idea if that's going to happen here. But it's out there that it has some history to it, that it is there. And it may come because, again, I just don't think people like to be told what to do. So they're going to do other options. A lot of these other options are going to be more expensive. The other options are going to be bigger bags, heavier bags, which is opposite of what we want to attain here in the situation. So, some other interesting information is plastic bags are actually the most sustainable option at the checkout counter as long as they're disposed of properly. And then the conventional plastic bag is the one with the least environmental impacts. Okay, the cotton study is an option that's not recommended, requiring between over 100 to 2,800 uses for environmental impacts. So there's other documentation out there that this is not the only option, and it should not necessarily be considered as such. Again, paper bag is the least performing bag with 4 to 2 times greater potential impact over the conventional plastic bag. Paper bag costs more to produce. Costs more in water, costs more in electricity. So you have, again, on anything, you have a pull and tuck, and there's different options out there. So what are some ways to handle it? Well, and also, again, I don't know what's here, but there's other studies that say that on the beach, around 1% is plastic bags that is picked up on the beach. Again, I don't know what that is here. I don't know what it is on Lake Erie. I still go back to education is the key, because if you want to keep Lake Erie clean, plastic bags there's an option in there, and algae is another option, and so you can name all these different things, and we're looking at one area, but I'm just saying, if you address litter, which is because of all of us, and because of trash can that's open, that things blow out of, things like that, that's where it starts. It's because of us doing that. It's not because of a bag, or it's not because of this, or it's not because of a water bottle, or it's not because of a tire or anything along those lines. So basically, what most thought process would be is to educate. Educate, don't put plastic bags in your curbside recycling, take it back to the grocery store, take it back to where they are going to go ahead and send it. There are places, like you had mentioned before, that will recycle film. Why doesn't some of the other places recycle film? Because they don't make any money on it. So now we're going to take a situation where they don't make money on it, but we're going to go ahead and charge our stores that we shop at, make them pay more money. Or they're going to come back and charge us because they're not going to have the extra dollars that they wanted that they're not going to actually actually keep. They're not going to take on that responsibility. They're going to pass that on. And so we all have litter laws. Are they being enforced? Are they working as intended? Proper waste receptacles. Make sure that the garbage is, again, the waste receptacle top is covered. So these are different things that, that would work towards the same goal, but without having something that tells you have to do this or you have to do that. And that's the overall objective, I think, that we all have. And I think if the money that's spent and the money that's going to be marketing or informational is spent on how you not litter and ways you can try to stop litter and how you can be more responsible, then those are the things that I think are the more important factors the money should be spent on, rather than the potential bans that's going to cost more dollars.
Yeah, thank you. Just one question. You mentioned a couple of times the additive that can be added as alternatives, and I agree with you that there are lots of alternatives. That one was most interesting to me. What is that?
So there's an additive that allows bags to degrade in landfills, and it's tested by independent labs, and it tests out to prove that the product will degrade. Basically, microorganisms, it's a short way of the conversation. The short version is the microorganisms that live underground, they will basically eat the plastic bags and excrete out methane and carbon dioxide gas. And then the landfills that are there will actually capture that methane gas, turn that into energy. Oberlin, they're energy by a local landfill that captures the methane and turns it into energy. And so there are options, and if everybody works together towards those different options, I think that it would be more beneficial, because it's a longer lasting thing. Because if you ban this, then you're going to have to ban something else, as opposed to actually addressing the issue, which is basically litter, and it's basically because of us, in one way or the other. So if we can do that and get out of a little bit of our comfort zone, you can bring back the bags to the Giant Eagle, or you can bring back the Giant Eagle bags and use them when you buy stuff, buy all your groceries. So.
Any other comments or questions from anyone on the committee?
Yeah, I'd like to say a little something more after listening to
Mr. Appistorff.
this.
Yes,
Appistorff.
Jeff?
Yeah, there you go, Jeff. Yeah.
As with anything environmental, there's no one answer that's a good answer. I've done some research, and I don't know if it's true or not, but the University of Denmark Ministry of Environment and Food found that paper bags need to be used at least 43 times to match or lessen the environmental impact of one-use plastic bags. Inorganic cotton needs to be used 20,000 times, not to mention how many times you might have to wash it for it to be comparable to a plastic bag. And another thing, the one-use plastic bags are used by many church groups to crochet mats for the homeless that are donated to them, that they can lay them on the ground and put their blanket or whatever over it, and it's a barrier for water so that they can have a comfortable place. So there are many things that those plastic bags can be recycled and used for. Thank you.
You're welcome. And just one more additional comment, because sometimes you have to be aware of the paper bag from the standpoint that a bag is porous. So if you're going to print on that bag, it could bleed unless that bag sometimes is treated. And if it's treated, it's usually treated with some sort of plastic. If the bag is protected against the elements, which of course we all have, and to keep that bag from falling apart, in many cases it's going to be treated with plastic. If it's treated with plastic, it's not going to be able to be recycled in a paper recycled situation. And if it's treated with plastic and it goes into a landfill, the question is, when will it degrade? Because it has the plastic around it. Now, not all bags are treated. The question will be, and actually in the ordinance it doesn't say that it has to be treated or not. So the question will be is, if they are treated, that kind of dissolves that option that you're looking to try to get, and it hurts that opportunity, and it takes away the degradation aspect of that if it goes into a landfill.
Well, that's interesting, because there's been like a big push. I know, I think one of the cities in California outlawed straws. And so the response to that was to have these paper straws, which I never really understood how that worked. I mean, is that the same with those as well?
Yes, usually straws and a lot of paper products that are going to be used with water are going to have some sort of coating. And it's usually going to be a plastic coating, because otherwise if you have a straw and you're drinking something in it, and it's a paper straw. Now, there are certain paper straws that are going to be thicker, but when it's paper, it could be turned into wood. It depends on how thick that's going to be, and again, it goes into the standpoint of dollars and cents. But if it's a normal size straw, then it's usually coated with some sort of plastic. If that's the case, then it ends up in a landfill for a long period of time.
Mrs. Belvier, any comments or questions for Mr. Astro?
No.
No. All right, anyone else from the committee? Or from council, I mean? Go ahead.
Hi, Jim. First, thanks for being here this evening. We appreciate it. You mentioned this additive. So are you saying that this additive gets added to petroleum-based plastic bags?
That's correct.
Okay. And you mentioned that the bags that you're providing are more environmentally friendly. So how do they compare material-wise and also cost-wise to the general plastic bags that are being provided at our retail outlets?
So there's different options that one can take. One can take a plastic bag. You start with a plastic bag that's 100% plastic. One of the options is you add a mineral to that plastic bag, which is limestone, ground calcium carbonate. There's also a mineral that's from the Bahamas, that's a natural mineral from the water. You add that to the plastic, so you reduce the amount of plastic, but you're adding a certain amount of mineral that starts as an inert object, so it will be degradable. There's one option. The second option is the recycling scenario, where you add recycled product. Post-industrial, which is basically everybody that makes the product, they go ahead and they take that product and they recycle it. And post-consumer, which is obviously if we're taking back bags to Giant Eagle or whatever the case may be, a certain percentage of that is used, which is also identified here in the paper aspect of the ordinance, where you want to have 100% of that bag recycled, which is a good thing. And then the third option would be to add our additive. Our additive is basically 1%. Now, if you put the mineral to it, it's less expensive. So it's going to cost less for that whatever place to be buying that bag. If you put in recycled product, it's less expensive. If you put in the additive for degradation, it's more expensive. If you put in some sort of combination, which is feasible to do, you can come up with probably cost neutral, which is basically about what they're paying right now. And this goes for all these different bags. I mean, the product, there's other companies, we have this product, we own the formulations of the product. There's other companies around the country that has that product. Our product is in the University of Virginia in their bookstore bag. The product's also in the Hilton Corporation in their amenity bottles, and different things like that. So it is out there, it is available, and again, I think the best scenario is to try to educate, and whenever you have only one, then you have that something on the other end that seems to be a little out of whack. And so I've always been trying to do something that would be in the middle, that would be advantageous to help as much as possible.
So you mentioned that the plastic bags are about 1.5 cents and the paper bags are 8 cents. So what is your bag?
I mean, our bag would be our bag would be 1.5 cents. If we did that bag, which we don't, but if we did that bag, it'd probably be about 1.5 cents. If you added these other products, it'd maybe be 1 cent, 1.25 cents. If you added our additive, it'd probably be about 7% more. So it'd be like 1.7 cents or 2.1 cents.
You don't even do these.
We've made these bags, but we don't, you know, in our personal company business model, we don't get involved with this type of bag because it's a very aggressive, high volume, low profit type of product. And again, like I mentioned before, they don't even want to change for a penny or two to sell from one plastic company to another plastic company. So this is why my comment would be is that they would be reluctant to take on 8 cents and not find a way to pass that on in some way, shape, or form. And again, you know, it's not my business. I can't comment that it would happen for sure. But I do know for sure in situations where I definitely would talk to people and they wouldn't make a move for, you know, they would make a move for a penny or two to a different company because it's a big savings for them. I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars because there's a lot of volume. There's a lot of people that go through a lot of these locations and all of them are taking home 5, 6, 7 bags. And the question is, you know, unless they're using a reusable bag, or they're reusing those bags and they should be. I mean, as a Giant Eagle would like nothing better than to have a reusable bag. So you guys come in all day long, and they would save a fortune. I mean, so they're also into trying to find ways to. They don't want to be forced to pay for a higher bag, but they would love to find a way to make it so that find a way to have people bring back their bags, or even if they're using a Giant Eagle blue bag or whatever, you know, use that. That's could be reused again and again and again.
So again, education, an alternative.
Right.
So to sum up though, it's really not economically feasible for the stores to use the bags with, you mentioned 3 different options, but they're all going to cost more.
No. The one with the mineral will cost less. The one with the recycled product will cost less. The one with the biodegradable additive would cost more. So they have an option of 2 of the 3 that could cost them less.
So why are people not doing that?
They might be. Like I said, I haven't forced. Well, they're not buying the additive because it costs more.
Right.
And the mineral is something that it's sometimes harder on equipment, so the question is the manufacturer willing to do that? And then the third one is recycle, and they are more and more getting involved more and more with the recycled product. I mean, on our end, we see more and more companies across the United States that are asking us to supply PCR, which is post-consumer recycled product, for whatever it is. Whether it's film, whether it's rigid, it's just plastics in general. That's what they're looking for.
You're seeing that market increase, is what you're saying.
The markets, yeah, that part of the market, that market segment has gone up and a lot. And that's, again, because that's less expensive, that's the direction people would want to go, naturally. You know, I don't blame them for that.
Sure.
So what happens to the petroleum in the petroleum-based bags as they degrade in the landfill?
So if they degrade by the additive, then they basically become methane gas and carbon dioxide gas. And the carbon dioxide is absorbed by the green plants, and the methane is absorbed by the landfill, which has the equipment to turn that methane into energy, like in Oberlin.
And is there somewhere you could direct us to read about this?
Sure. Maybe.
You can provide that to us later, that's
Okay.
fine.
That's fine.
You mentioned Europe with the whole recycling, that they, really do a better job of recycling more than we do. But don't they have legislation in place where the members of the European Union they're going to be mandated to try and dramatically reduce the number of bags that their citizens use? I think there's like a two-step deadline on what they have to do.
Depending upon the country in Europe, it's different, but basically what they've done is they've educated the people there, and part of it is because there's really, to a certain degree, no choice. They don't have landfills all over the place that they can just go ahead and throw their product in. So they needed to find ways of finding opportunities and options to handle this. But one of their ways is they use plant-based product, plant-based resin. Okay, so then that's going to be, again, that's going to be more expensive, but that's an option to choose. The second thing is they do, and they are very aggressive in their way of handling things. They, in some places in Sweden, you'll go to someone's house and they'll have a garbage can that's going to be for paper, a garbage can that's going to be for high density, a garbage can for low density, and then they will have the pickup, and then their recycling centers will recycle it appropriately. And then that reduces the amount of contamination, it makes that process easier. But again, at the end of the day, and they also sometimes charge for bags, for the t-shirt bags. And so they do that as well. So they have a variety of different ways of addressing that, all of which people choose their option of what they prefer to do.
Right, but I think specifically relating to the disposable plastic bags, they are on track to dramatically reduce their use. And the countries involved that belong to the European Union, they have a couple different options, but basically they have to dramatically reduce the use of the disposable bags. I understand what you're saying about the other types of plastics and glass and all that. I understand, but I'm just referring to the plastic bags. You also mentioned that, this whole ideal works if the bags are disposed of properly. But the problem is they're not. And I understand what you're saying about the education. And, I do think there's been a lot of education and a lot of information out there about how bad it is for the environment on multiple levels. But the bottom line is there's so many bags that are not disposed of properly. And I also think in my discussions with some of the managers, which I'll get into a little bit later, of our retailers and some representatives from these recycling facilities, the biggest problem is that they don't have an end use for recycled plastic bags. They don't have enough of an end use. There's very, very limited end uses for recycled bags. And I'm not even getting into like the whole contamination issue either, because that just kind of throws, everything we're talking about out the window once there's above a certain level of contamination.
Right.
So, I guess I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that, or, disposed of properly.
I would say that, depending upon the product, I would say send them my way because we could buy as much as we can get. This is what's happening in the industry. It's getting more and more aggressive in that area because it's taking away from virgin resin and just reusing it as many times as it possibly can. Now again, I don't know where it would go. It could go into rigid plastic, it could go into into plastic film, it could go into newspaper bags, whatever the case may be. But we sell can liners that have our additive to it to Cisco. And we always make the comment is you're going to go ahead and put a lot of things in a garbage bag, but if the garbage bag goes in a landfill and it's not degradable, how's the rest of the stuff going to degrade? So again, it's my whole thing is that I normally don't like to be dictated to one way or the other. I like to normally try to figure out ways that are solutions that could be worked on together, so to speak. And that's, and you know, I mean, and I think you're right, you know, people like convenience, and people do what they want to do, and it makes it frustrating, you know, but I'm not sure I would necessarily give that up, and I try to figure out, ways to keep fighting it, maybe through legislation, I don't know. I mean, I wish I knew the answer, but I don't know the answer, but we continue to go that direction and try to educate as much as possible, and I think at some point, that's where things turn, when people start to realize, you know what, it makes sense. And then the next person says, you know what, that does make sense. And hopefully that kind of catches on and gets into a downhill ball and is positive.
So if your company's in the market for all these plastic bags, like why aren't you contacting the grocery stores about getting your plastic bags?
Because we're not recycling, we would be contacting the recycling centers.
Right, so the
Yeah.
recycling centers, we have some here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get plastic bags from them?
We have other we basically are buying our PCR locations that are close to where the end customer is, just because of freight.
Sure.
And so those are the things that happen in that direction. So, but if there were opportunities here, then we would be contacting them and trying to move that thing forward. We would love to do whatever we could to help. And we might have we work with Waste Management. They have programs that they want to try to help things go forward. We'd be happy to bring them involved in it. You know, those are the things that we would love to try to do. As much as we can help, we would be happy to.
Okay. And I guess I'd just like to know if Mr. Foley has any comments on what the gentleman has said or any questions.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. One is I'm not an expert on plastics or the chemicals and all the stuff that goes into plastics. I do want to say that one of the reasons that we're doing this is that the market hasn't worked, right? So the recycling rate when you go to recycle plastic bags is less than 2%, I think. You know, so right now people have bins. You know, the Giant Eagles and the places have bins where you can take your bags. And the recycling, people bringing those bags back is so small in comparison to the huge amount of bags that are, you know, foisted on people. I mean, you go to a grocery store, you don't even have to ask. All of a sudden, you're getting 2 bags for, you know, your 1 gallon of milk, right? So, just kind of the way things work right now aren't conducive to solving this problem. And so that's why I think that you know, Cuyahoga County, as well as, you know, 400 other communities across the country and ever many countries throughout the world, have said, you know, look, we have to solve this problem. We have to work on this problem, and the way to do that is to reduce the amount of bags that are put into the ecosystem, basically. And so that's how we've addressed it, and we think it's an appropriate and effective way to address the problem.
I would like to offer one thing. I'm sorry, Mr. Shai, but I wouldn't say the market hasn't worked. It's already mentioned that China, where most of our waste was going, has changed policies just recently. And so, as Mr. Appelsdorf just said, the market for that is growing. I mean, that stuff doesn't happen overnight. And so, I'm very firm believer in the free market. I don't like, as Mr. Appelsdorf talked about, the government telling you can do this, you can't do that. You know, the science out there obviously is conflicted. We've heard 2 different sides of this, and to use the analogy, squash a mosquito with a sledgehammer doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I just, you know, you're asking people to change the way that they do things, and I think it's okay to ask people to change the way they do things through education. I don't know that it's really the government's responsibility to say you will do this, which is what this does. And you know, there's a ton of statistics out there. For example, I spoke with one of the council people I talked to that called me. If Cuyahoga County eliminated all plastic, which is not what this does, but if Cuyahoga County eliminated every single piece of plastic in efforts to save Lake Erie, it would really have very little effect. And the reason for that is because Cuyahoga County is one of a very small number of counties that even touch Lake Erie. Plus, you have other states that touch it. You have a nation to the north, Canada, that touches it. And so while I understand it's our small part, you know, I get all that, it's not really going to solve anything except it's going to make people's lives in here more inconvenient. It's going to cost them more money. It's going to cost businesses. And in the research that I've done, 90% of plastic pollution in the world comes from 10 rivers in Asia and Africa. So even if America gets rid of 100% of our pollution, you're still looking at 90%. We're cut the number in half that's coming from those regions. And so while I think it's a nice thing to say, and I think it's a nice thing to do in practicality, it's, as Mr. Appelsdorf just said, when you're forcing people to do something, they're going to find alternatives. And Mrs. Politsky mentioned this a second ago, those alternatives are going to be to buy thicker, bigger bags for trash liners. Every study that I found, these bans went in place, the purchases of those bags skyrocketed, some up to 120%. So again, I know we're not going to convince each other one way or the other. What I'm saying is there are alternatives out there. To just carte blanche say you can't do this anymore, and with 11 exemptions, and the same plastic bag that's sold at Walmart, is used at Walmart, could be used across the street at a restaurant. Exact same one. So that is somewhat, you can say not picking winners and losers, but that's essentially what the county is doing. It's saying it's okay for you to use this bag, but you can't use this bag. And I get where you're coming from, the sheer volume. I understand that. I get that. But if the bag is the problem, then where that person gets the bag, to me, doesn't make any difference. And so I respect what Mrs. Balbier said about wanting to change things, and as a private business owner, she's welcome to do that. Just like Aldi, they've charged for bags for years. Walmart, if they wanted to tomorrow, they could start charging for bags. That's fine, that's up to them to do as a private company. I would strongly disagree that the market hasn't worked. I would say that the market is changing because of world policy that's changing. But I don't think that this is going to really do much of anything. The biggest problem, an article here from actually News Channel 5, July 21st, 2017, they said this. The study they conducted said, harmful algae blooms are the primary concern for Lake Erie. So it's not plastic, it's not even mentioned anywhere in this article. It's algae blooms that's causing the main problem from Lake Erie. And I think Mr. Appelsdorf might have mentioned that. And so, again, it's such a small, minute thing compared to a much larger problem. I don't see how it's going to benefit. And that's just from the plastic side of it, not to mention all the other stuff that I talked about. The survey that Mr. Appelsdorf talked about, the New Jersey survey, I actually looked that up as well. And 0.8% was the number of pollution of the plastic bags on the highways. No one likes to see them flying around, but the reason we see them flying around is because that's the most visible thing. The number one on that category was rubber by far. It was over 11%. Well, that comes from rubber tires from vehicles. I mean, so you can't outlaw cars. I suppose you could, but you're not going to do that. And so again, I'm not going to rehash everything over and over again, but I think that in this situation, we're just have to, in my opinion, agree to disagree. I don't think that it's as major of a problem as what the county has said that it is. I think Mr. Appelsdorf has offered several solutions. Did the county, in your research, did the county reach out to any of the folks in this professional industry and have them come in to speak to them at all?
The plastics industry came in and made their positions very clear. So,
but I mean, were they invited to come in, or they just come in and speak at public sessions?
They came in and spoke at public sessions. They came in and met with the executive. They came in and met with each individual council member. So they weren't shy, right? So,
sure.
And they expressed their positions. And basically, they were just against the ban. I mean, so they were pretty. They didn't talk about other things.
Well, the others that you talked about.
No, they did not. I just want to say that, look, we don't live in Asia, right? We live on Lake Erie, right? And no doubt, algae bloom problems are a huge issue for the water quality of Lake Erie. But I want to reiterate this. This is, fresh water is our bread and butter, right? This is our big thing. And plastic pollution, microplastics, plastic degradation, getting into fish, getting into the water supplies is an issue that we have to be really sensitive about and careful about. And so I think that the ban, which doesn't solve all the problems in the world, but it solves a lot of them and minimizes the problem. And you're right, we're one entity on Lake Erie, but we're 1.2 million people around Lake Erie, right? And we are probably the largest county, our largest geographic center on Lake Erie, more so than Buffalo, and more so than Detroit's mostly on north of that, Grand Lake, St. Mary's, or St. Mary's Lake. So we're a big, huge problem in this in terms of Lake Erie, and I think we have a larger responsibility than a lot of other places do because we put a lot of pollution into the lakes. So I know we may not agree, but
We don't.
I think that
That's
is
fine.
our,
That's a conversation.
but I do think we have a higher obligation and higher level of responsibility to minimize our impact on what is our, what is something that is really, really important for us as a region, fresh water.
Thank you, Mr. Foley. All right, did you have a question for Mr. Foley? I'm sorry. Mr. Foley, gotta go back up.
Oh, sorry.
Mrs. Ranshack, you had a question. I apologize. Can you turn that mic back on? By chance? I know it was honking out a second ago, but is it dead?
I can hear you.
It sounds bad.
So I believe the county in the past had talked about doing a fee on the bags instead of a ban. And a few different resources I've read have actually said that that is more effective. Do you, and I know you did not, directly work on this, but do you have any idea why they didn't go with a fee and went with a ban, as they call it, instead?
They couldn't get the votes.
Okay,
So they could get the votes on a ban, they couldn't get the votes on a fee.
interesting. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Foley.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Eppistorp, as well. At this time, I'm going to open it up for other council members if they have anything else, or the committee first. Any other comments or the committee wants to make? Mrs. Belbier? Okay, Ms. Flitsky.
I only wanted to say one thing. I was talking to Mary Ellen Stasek a while back, and she's part of Big Creeks Connects, and they clean up the creeks and different things, and she said, although there are a few plastic bags now and then they pick up much more plastic lids from coffee, plastic containers from different restaurants and such, and I guess that's not the only plastic. The bags aren't just the issue. All plastic is, and I don't know what we can do about that. I think the alternative is education and letting people know you can't be doing this because this is our environment and we have to keep it clean. And I think that's the biggest thing to do because we can't ban every piece of plastic that's out there. And that's it.
Right. And to reiterate what she just said, that survey that we talked about, the reason we chose this one because it was the most recent one I could find. Number 35 on this above that was rubber, other paper, shrink wrap from like plastic, like candy bar, stuff like that, water bottles, napkins, matches, corrugated, and all these things, 34 things listed above, the plastic bags. And so, I mean, it's like picking one thing, but that's certainly not by any stretch of the imagination even the biggest part of the problem. All right, anyone else from council, anything like to add? Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So I just want to, since I introduced it with Ron, Councilman Van Kirk, I just wanted to give a statement regarding a little bit of why I introduced this and why I even looked into it a little further. So first off, I do care deeply about the environment. I've changed my habits and my behaviors to do my part in helping the environment, including following the 3 R's related to waste that I was taught many years ago at school: reduce, reuse, and recycle. I took my actions to help our community and the environment a step further when I organized and participated in community cleanups around Brooklyn, where myself and volunteers picked up trash in designated locations this past summer. To Councilwoman Belbier's point, it was actually cigarette butts, candy wrappers, styrofoam, and trash from miscellaneous fast food restaurants, including cups, wrappers, and paper bags, that were the most picked up items that I personally picked up this summer. When President Van Kirk first approached me about this legislation, I told him I wanted to look over the county ordinance and research it myself a little further. I took the time to look at the written legislation that was passed by County Council, including the 11 exceptions for disposable plastic bag use, plus the dozens of types of plastic that are single-use that are not eliminated by this legislation, including packaging wrap for paper towels, toilet paper, bottled water, bread bags, the list goes on and on. I then looked further into the controversy of plastic bag bans across the country, the research since these bans began, and the alternatives to government banning certain types of plastic. One such study, which was published by NPR, showed a 60% spike in the sale of 8-gallon garbage bags and a 120% increase in sale of 4-gallon garbage bags, both of which are thicker than grocery store bags, after a ban went into place in California. Furthermore, paper bags and reusable bags are not always a healthy alternative for the environment, as reusable totes have to be used many times before bettering the environment. Paper bags require cutting down and processing of trees, which involves lots of water, toxic chemicals, fuel, and heavy machinery. There's a lot of research both for and against this type of legislation, and I was disappointed that the Cuyahoga County Council didn't do their own research on this effect, as one council person suggested. I believe that before the government steps in and bans something, we should do our due diligence to fully research before passing legislation. Passing legislation to just do something is not the approach I would like to see in my government. I believe we should educate the public, make it more convenient for the public to recycle, and encourage reuse and recycling of plastic bags before deciding to ban them. For these reasons, I decided to introduce this legislation with Councilman Van Kirk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brashaw. Anyone else on council?
As I mentioned in our previous meeting, I did speak with many of the managers of our retail establishments in the city of Brooklyn. And basically, if the ban goes into effect, they're certainly going to comply. Most of the big retailers, they already have to comply with regulations, bans, restrictions that are already in place in other states and other localities. One of my questions to them was that if Brooklyn exempted them from the ban, what would that do? Would that help you? And they all said it most likely would not make a difference. Large businesses like to keep things as standard as possible. It makes things easier for them and their employees. And there's also an economy of scales that comes into play when they're purchasing, whether they're going to provide the plastic bags, paper, or whatever. And so because of that, they're not going to continue just to purchase bags for one store that's here in Brooklyn. One manager mentioned that in their experience, plastic bags are the #1 source of litter that they have behind their store. So I also contacted one of the recyclers, this is a company in Cleveland, who they are one of the entities who actually takes these bales of plastic and cardboard from the stores that have these receptacles. And what most of the stores don't know at the store level is they all say they don't want to be responsible for policing what's going in or the level of contamination. However, they indirectly are, because when these bales are analyzed at this recycling facility, they determine if the level of contamination is acceptable or not. And if it is not acceptable, there is then a chargeback to that retailer for that, because basically what happens with that entire bale then is it doesn't get recycled, it goes to the landfill. So the stores are being paid at this point for what they're trying to recycle, but if the contamination level is too much, they're charged back for it. And at the store manager level, they were not even aware of this. Basically, under the old standard, they could have 3 to 5% contamination in a 1,000-pound bale. Under the new standard, it's 0.0520, so they can only have a maximum of up to 5 pounds of contamination in one of these 1,000-pound bales. So if there's more than 5 pounds, the entire bale is not recyclable and it goes to a landfill. One of the things they shared with me that in today's market, it's almost impossible to recycle these bags. There's 3 different grades to the film, which is what they call the plastic bags, A, B, and C. Anything from a retail establishment is classified a C, which is the lowest grade. And it's very, very difficult to actually recycle any of these. It's very rare. They mostly end up in the landfill. The biggest problem is there are not enough end uses for this material. And I know I did look into, there's talk about that sometimes it is used in decking, the plastic decks, right, Trex. And there's another company that basically turns them into briquette, like a briquette type thing, that then it's used to burn, and I can't remember exactly what it is, I apologize, I don't have that note in front of me. But when you look at the amount of plastic bags that people do return to the store, which is very small, when you look into all the plastic bags out there, hardly any of it is truly recycled. And so I don't think that part of the system is working at all. And Africa. On the African continent, they are leading the world in plastic bag regulation, just so everybody knows, since it was brought up. Began in 2017, and it is continuing. But they have enacted strict bans on plastic bags. I had a question for Mr. Butler, and that is, one of my questions to you was, how is this going to be policed and enforced? And you said, one of your replies was that has to be discussed in committee. So I think that's a big unknown on how the city is going to police and enforce this requirement that we're now making of certain retailers to provide the receptacles and do their best to make sure they're recycled, which, as I just stated, really doesn't happen. But could you address that, please?
I indicated in my response to your question, Councilwoman, and I thank you for it, that ordinarily any regulations that are found in the business regulations code within our codified ordinances are enforced by the building commissioner. I don't believe that task has been assigned. It certainly would not have yet been assigned in light of the fact that the legislation hasn't passed. But I think it's a valid question to ask. I think it would be a valid question to ask who would enforce the countywide ban, countywide and in Brooklyn, if the countywide ban were applicable in Brooklyn. But similarly here, I just don't think the question is answered yet.
Because basically we'd have to be looking at, first, the easy thing is, yes, they're providing the receptacle, but then the secondary part of that is providing the city with documentation on what they're doing with it.
I don't think that's part of the regulations before you, Councilwoman, that they'd have to provide the city documentation, but maybe on a complaint of a violation of the code, we'd be able to investigate and determine whether or not those bags are being, unlawfully placed into the regular trash.
So we're mandating that it doesn't end up in a solid waste facility, that they have to ensure that it's recycled unless it's contaminated. So wouldn't we have to know that they're not sending it to a landfill?
Well,
if that's one of the mandates?
So as the ordinance is written before you, the council can do what it wishes to do with the ordinance, but as the ordinance is written before you, there are no proactive measures that would require reporting, for example, to enable us to ensure that this ordinance were being enforced. But I will say that the code is replete with examples of that also being the case. There are prohibitions all over our codified ordinances that don't require proactive reporting measures to ensure that the law is being followed. Speeding, for example.
It would be reported, and then would have the burden of proof would then lie on them if it were reported if there was a complaint, just like any other of our codes, correct?
No. Well,
like if something, one of our codes is being violated, one of our building codes for whatever reason was being violated, the people that don't have to file reports of what's going on. There would have to be a complaint filed with the building department, and then it would be incumbent upon them to follow up with that, and then that individual / business would have to show documentation or proof that what they're already conforming to the code.
Correct. Both examples exist in our code. We have, for example, proactive reporting requirement when banks file foreclosure actions in the city with respect to properties in the city. We obligate those banks to notify us that such an action has been filed. We don't have proactive reporting requirements for lots of the criminal prohibitions within our code, including within the Business Regulations Code. And as this ordinance is written currently, there's no such proactive reporting requirement. It would require that we, I don't know, periodically check in, maybe with some permission, to see what's happening with those recycled bags.
Okay, thank you. And I thought the mayor was here. Did she leave? Because my final question was for her, and I can email this to her. I was just wondering what changed her mind about this, because she and I had a conversation about this in June, and the exact quote was she felt like this was opening a hornet's nest. So I will email her and find out what changed her mind on that. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Just as a couple of follow-up thoughts, and thank you, Mrs. Bucci. As always, you've done your homework, and I always appreciate that, even if we disagree. I appreciate the work that you do on that. As far as whether the stores in Brooklyn go along with the county ban or not, that's fine. That's their choice. I have no problem with that. If we pass this ordinance and the stores choose themselves to go along with the county ordinance, that's completely on them. That's completely fine. That's a business decision. That's fine. There are other states that already ban them, so they are used to conforming to different things in different areas. As far as the contamination and recycling, we already deal with that in the individual level. So I mean, to try to say, that this problem would be exclusive to that, that's simply not true. I mean, we've talked ad nauseum on council, and the mayor mentioned tonight about the fact that a lot of it's contaminated. And the only way that's going to change is to go back to Mr. Appesdorf's education, to inform people, to let them know that, look, whenever you throw your recycle bag into the container, you have to dump it out because the bag itself is not recyclable. So again, education. Litter laws. We already have tons of litter laws on the books. Are they being enforced? Are people being educated? By the looks of driving down 480, I'd say no, they're not being enforced. Mrs. Ryan Shockey can attest to that from her cleanups that she's had this summer. It's already illegal to throw stuff out the window, and yet people throw stuff out the window. Right? So educating on that, enforcing some of those laws are already on the books, and of course, proper waste receptacles. I think the city of Brooklyn does a great job with that. We provide a lot of them. All of them have lids on them, right? So the stuff's not blowing everywhere. But as far as not enough end uses, I don't know enough in this area to know whether that's true or not. I will say, though, that as Mr. Appesdorf mentioned, that market is increasing. I know that Trex especially is increasing. I mean, just from personally, I know 2 people right now that are using it to put decks in, and that comes from plastic. And so, but those are just some follow-up thoughts there. This meeting has gone on for a very long time, and so I don't want to belabor the point. Is anyone else on the committee or any of the members of council have anything they'd like to add? Okay, I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
To adjourn, Ron Van Kirk,
Yes.
Mary Belbeer,
Yes.
Barb Politzky.
Yes.
Thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate it. Mr. Foley, thank you, Mr. Appesdorf.